Okay. All right. We are back. This is Riders of the Dawn.
I'm Jay.
And I am Stu. And what are we going to talk about today?
Do you need to pay an editor?
Editing. Yes. The thing that people talk about that they often don't know what it means, even editors. So, here's the thing about editing any manuscript, and this is going to be mainly for books, right? Books and stories, not screenplays. Screenplays, I think, are a pretty different process.
There's a different process, and I'm sure we might say something about it, but
so there's this idea out there. People haven't done it. They have this idea like, okay, you write your manuscript, you hand it to an editor. The editor edits the manuscript, and then it's published. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So here's what happens: is that you write a manuscript, you hand it to an editor, and pay them money, and they justify that money.
somehow they tell you things that they've done.
Okay, so yeah, this is you got to think about like the mind game at play here. Yeah. But so like if you hand your manuscript to an editor and give them $1,000, now imagine that somebody should do this experiment with something that's like considered really good, but the editor hasn't read that particular book.
Yeah.
And give them the manuscript for that book and see how they tear it to pieces, right? Like find an editor who's never read Elric of Melniboné, and then so here's my new fantasy novel, and they'll come back and they'll be like, it's not long enough, and they'll just like rip it apart, even though it's an absolute classic of English literature, or at least fantasy literature. That would be an interesting experiment. But the thing is, there's different kinds of editing.
Yeah, you've got content editing, and you've got copy editing, and you've also got line editing. And these are all separate processes, and so you need to understand which one you're expecting your proposed editor to do.
Yeah.
When you're talking about content editing, you're talking about your plot. You're talking about getting feedback on what is important to.
Yeah, you're basically telling somebody how to make your manuscript into a better version of itself. And a lot of times there's you want to make sure that characters are consistent and things like that. And those, honestly, you don't really want an editor for that. You want a lot of different people to read your manuscript to give you feedback on that. Like having beta readers and that kind of thing.
Because you can hand your manuscript over to an editor and tell them that that's what you want, and they'll tell you those things, but it's not going to be really market facing feedback.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's going to be their analysis. You're basically paying someone for an analysis of that. And you're probably not going to have beta readers until you've established yourself a little bit, and that's fine.
But you can always find someone to read it.
You might find your sister or someone who wants to read.
Yeah, your sister, your girlfriend.
Tell you what's up. So that's content editing. And honestly, when it comes to content editing,
you need to do it yourself.
Yeah, you need to really develop the ability to be self-critical. A good idea, and most writers that are kind of starting out are not going to want to do this because they finish a product and they're like, I have to make this product great.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a good idea to take what you've written and just put it away for a little while and do the next thing, come back to it later.
I think we can both say that the first things that we published, we sat on for over a year.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Before we took it to the marketplace, and just let other people read it. Have it up. I had mine up on my blog. Thanks to same thing.
Yeah, you could have. Yeah, Muramasa was available free for 2 years.
Yeah, and you get a lot of feedback on that kind of stuff. And also, when you finally go back and read it, you have fresh eyes. It's not you now. It's you from a year ago. So you don't take it personally when you say something sucks.
Yeah. and you can happily kill your darlings because they're not so precious to you anymore. There was all kinds of stuff that I cut out of Ramasa just to make it a little bit better story. I cut, probably 10,000 words of stuff just because it, when you're doing that sort of editing. So there's actually different parts of content editing. So if you're editing for length, that's one thing. If you're editing to increase the quality of the manuscript, that's something different. If you're editing to edit for style, that's something a little bit different. And each of those, you can do them all kind of at once, but each of those is different. So editing for style is making sure basically your sentences are good. Editing for length is trying to shorten the manuscript because you feel like it's too long for what's in it. And
which could also be pacing.
Yeah, pacing is a big part of it. And editing for to just make the manuscript better is saying, like, does this scene serve the purpose of the story, or do I need to rewrite it?
Yeah.
Because in a lot of cases, revisions involve rewriting parts, and we don't usually think of that as part of the editing process, but it really needs to be thought of as part of the editing process.
Which is why it's so important to do it yourself.
Yeah, you're the one who has to do all the rewrites.
Yeah.
So anyway, when you hand something to an editor, a content editor, they're going to tell you things so that you feel like you spent the money and they feel like they earned it.
Yeah.
Whether those things are really important or not, really justified or not. And you should pay attention to them if you choose to do that. But the main thing is, you probably didn't need to spend that money in the first place. Because if you listen to an expert, let's say you have an expert editor. Expert editors can be really wrong about what the marketplace wants, and you can also edit your manuscript
in a way that destroys its original intent.
Yeah, you can just destroy what you originally set out to do. And I think we've done that through screenplay revision before. Is that we've revised the screenplay to the point where we're like, we don't like this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what other people said the movie should be, but we don't like it anymore, and it's not funny, and we don't really want to work on it anymore.
Yeah. And that's so, that takes us into the screenplay process and what's kind of required nowadays in Hollywood is you have to get what's called coverage of your screenplay, which is basically before you can start shopping to agents, you have to pay basically interns to read your script for you and give it like a certain rating. And these ratings then you deliver to the agents you're shopping to, who then decide if they want to represent that. Because basically, well, two things. The first is the sheer amount of screenplays that go out each year, each week, each month is enormous.
Yeah, it's staggering.
The second is, frankly, the Hollywood structure is so inbred that and nepotistic that everyone wants a piece of the pie. So this is kind of just like a loophole to get other people more of your money, to get other people a bigger share of your work.
Yeah. It's to spread that wonderful screenwriting money around.
Now,
right?
we ran into something really rare where we found someone who was willing to do both, which is traditionally what you would do. The agent would read your script and decide what the merits of it were, and so that was
give you feedback.
Yeah, and the really great thing, they give you feedback. Now again, it came to a point where we felt like it wasn't the movie that we wanted to make, and what I think we realized is we really just wanted to make a cult indie film, not a Hollywood movie. But that's something we realized through the process, and we would never have learned had we not gone through the process. So here we are sharing that wisdom with you.
Yeah. The thing about so this is just an aside with screenwriting is screenwriting is not a big money maker, despite what you may have heard. So you're going to do conservatively 10 revisions of a script for free. So you're going to rewrite your script 10 times for free before somebody decides that they want to shop it around.
And maybe more than one of those is going to be a page one rewrite.
Yeah, they're gonna say like, you know what, you need to make it about this instead, and then you have to rewrite it from page one, or you need to get rid of this character, which means you have to rewrite it from page one.
Yeah.
You know, like, or this character needs to be this way.
Yeah.
So you're rewriting it from page one, which is a lot of work.
And also disheartening.
And really disheartening, yeah, to do those rewrites. And then maybe it gets shopped around, and probably the best you can hope for is an option.
Yeah.
And people get excited about options, but studios, an option is like $3,000, and you're like, okay, $3,000. Yeah, that's not enough to live on for a month in LA, just so you know. So you get the $3,000, which you have to split probably with someone else that you're writing the screenplay with. So now you're at $1,500, which is enough for like 2/3 of a one-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
In LA, and then 2 years pass and the option expires, and you're like, well, why did the option screenplay if they didn't mean to make it? And it's like, someone else was maybe making that movie, and they thought they might need to make a movie like that.
Yeah.
You know, so they just that's why they buy the option instead of buying the screenplay. And if they do buy the screenplay, you know, maybe it's $30,000, which is a lot of money.
Well, it varies because you could get an option for $10,000. You could get a bid on your screenplay for $50,000. If they actually like decide to make it, it could be like Snow White and the Huntsman, and it goes for over $1 million because there's a bidding war between studios. But
and then they revise it into Oblivion.
Yeah, and then you don't even get title credits for it because they rewrite it into Oblivion. So these are, I mean, the screenwriting world is a crazy thing, and it really just gets out of your hands so quickly that you're never going to have control of that end product unless you're making it yourself.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how editing goes in Hollywood. Back to novel format, narrative format. So we talked a little bit about content and the different types of content editing. The next thing that you might want to pay an editor for is for line editing, which would really be like checking for typos and grammatical errors.
Yeah.
Because and frankly, even sitting on your manuscript for a year, there's going to be some of that you miss, and there's going to be some of that your beta readers miss.
And I'm just going to tell you that you're not going to catch all the typos. You yourself, that's really where value comes in if you can get someone else to read it for the copy editing part, because your brain has a mechanism where it will correct errors as it goes, and you won't even perceive that you did that.
Yeah.
Your brain will just correct a sentence with the words that are supposed to be there. So it takes a certain kind of mentality to copy edit. You have to be really focused. And frankly, even if you do that, and even if you have someone do that, typos are going to get through. There's typos in Lord of the Rings. You know, I was reading Chronicles of Narnia a while back, and there's typos all through it, like missing periods or the wrong letter here. You know, the wrong word sometimes, or like you could tell that the original manuscript didn't have a clear word, or the typesetter made a mistake when he sent the type. There's always little mistakes that get made, and the thing is, you shouldn't care too much about this. If your typos and your grammatical errors are so numerous that they distract the reader, that's a problem. But most people are aware that most avid readers are used to seeing typos because they appear in even the most polished manuscripts, the most polished books. There's going to be like a couple of typos in the book, and most readers are not going to see 5 typos in a 100,000 word book, a 500-page book, and think like, oh man, how unprofessional are these typos, because they're used to seeing that. What they're going to remember is actually how you made them feel.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to remember. They're not really going to remember that there was a mistake here, a mistake there, or that this sentence wasn't clear here, or this sentence wasn't clear there. You're going to remember the overall feeling and those specific scenes that really affected them emotionally. So if you do choose to do this on your own and there are mistakes, it's okay. Okay, it's not
never
the end of the
be
world.
perfect.
Yeah, you're never going to get it quite perfect, and luckily most people aren't listening for like perfection. They're not reading for perfection. Sorry, they're not reading for perfection. They're reading to experience the story, and that's a good thing.
This is something that Derek Murphy said. People will forgive bad writing if it's a good story. If that makes sense. And the same goes for typos.
Yeah. So you don't know who Derek Murphy is? You're an indie author. You need to probably look him up. He spells his name slightly weird if I remember. He has a website called creativeindie.com, and he has a lot of content on how to design book covers, because that was how he made his bread for quite a number of years. But he's also an author, and I think he has a PhD in literature too. So he's not new to literature, right?
And he's a great resource that you would do yourself a favor to get to know.
Yeah. So like, if you look him up, he puts out a lot of this knowledge for free, and that's really, really great. And he also just has a lot of advice, because he's also really knows a lot about book marketing. And so that is one of the things that he said is like, this may sound weird, but the quality of writing is not as important as the appeal of the story. And that's true. And think about some of the hit books that we've had over the last 10 years, and how, like Hunger Games, which is written in like first-person present tense.
Yeah.
The worst style I can imagine, and like the most grating style I can imagine. But it had a story that appealed to people, and maybe even that bizarre style somehow made it stand out. If you think about like 50 Shades of Grey, which is terribly written, but for whatever reason it had some appeal to it. It had some story appeal to it that people liked. So like, things don't, or honestly, like, if I'm going to be honest, like the Da Vinci Code, and a lot of people like that book, it's kind of fast food literature. It's not like the prose is really good. It just has a story that's very compelling for people to read and to engage with. And that's probably what matters. So you got to focus on the important things, which is your story good? Is your plot good? And I'd say, the most important things to think about when you're editing is, first of all, your pacing. If you bore your reader, there's a really good chance he's going to close the book. You don't want that. You want someone to get to the end of that book, go on Amazon and give you a 5-star review. That's what you want.
You got to close the sale.
You got to close the sale.
Yeah, and for us, part of closing the sale is getting that review, because that's how you're going to get more sales.
Yeah, that's how you're going to create consumer confidence, is if they get to the end of the book and they really like it, and they're willing to leave you a 4 or 5-star review. That really helps. That really helps you out. And you want that 4 or 5-star review to be really authentic as well. You don't want a 4-star review that doesn't, that's just someone that gives 5 stars to everything.
Yeah.
You want someone who have actually enjoyed the book. That's what it is. You want people to read your story and enjoy it and understand it. So that's the main thing. Is like, think about your pacing. Cut the crap that doesn't do anything. So we talked about setting characters' plot.
Yeah.
If any scene in your book does not actively advance one of those 3, or preferably all of those 3, then you need to think about rewriting it, cutting it down, or just getting rid of it.
Yeah. And this is something I think, again, we learned in screenwriting, was you can't just write a scene because you think it's going to be a good funny gag. If that's all it's going to be, if it doesn't advance those 3, then it doesn't have a place in your pacing. Pacing is really important because it's part of your built-in tension, and if you don't have a good idea of how to pace something, it's like you need to have an emotional reaction every 1,000 words.
Yeah. There needs to be something that happens every, if you think about a regular novel, every 2 pages. As you're flipping the pages.
So as the author, you need to think about revealing something There needs to be some kind of advancement of plot every 2 pages, every 1,000 words.
Yeah, this isn't like a hard and fast rule. It's just, you want your story to be good, and you want to communicate your story. Editing out things that are superfluous is probably a good idea for any reader to understand your story. And why do people hold on to superfluous scenes? It's because it has some appeal in it to them that they're not able to combine with those other elements. So the best thing to do would be like, oh man, I really want to talk about this castle they're in. It's like, okay, well, you need to add into that scene plot.
Yeah.
You need to make that matter somehow to the story, or just have an event that can occur in any place. Put it in the place that you think should have an emotional impact, and
Right.
now you've fulfilled those requirements, and you get to keep the scene that means something to you.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
hope
makes
it makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing that I think you should worry about. You should worry about copy editing before you publish. Now, if you're going to go the ebook route, the great thing is you can fix mistakes later on,
Yeah.
which is great. And if you're going the traditional publisher route, they are going to do copy editing on their own. They should. Although I've heard that there are publishers that just don't do that anymore. That they want you to pay for the editing service and hand them a completed ebook, which they then put on Amazon and keep the money.
Yeah, keep the money. So it's not a very appetizing deal. Editing, I think my takeaway is paying for editing is not something you want to do.
Not early on.
Especially not early on, and if you really need to, you can't call up one of your old high school English teachers to copy edit for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just imagine your high school English teachers. Like, I wrote this book. Would you read
Yeah.
it? Like, they'd be like, oh my God, my student wrote a book. I have a student that did something.
Yeah, they would jump at the chance.
Yeah,
So,
they probably would jump at it.
these are, something that I've grown up with throughout my life is use your resources. Now, for some of us, our resources are our dollars, but I think it's more important that your relationships are also your resources. So, if you have people who you think would be willing to do something like that, go to them first. Now, again, your friends and your family are not going to be your audience, ultimately, but that in some ways makes it okay for them to help you in this editing process if they have those skills. Obviously, you don't want your illiterate uncle to read your manuscript and tell you that he doesn't understand these words. It'd be better to give that to your highly literate aunt, right, or whatever. But use those resources because your friends and your family have different skill sets from you, hopefully, and they can help you along the way, and you want to be able to reciprocate that in some way.
Yeah. Writing groups. Maybe we should wait for another show to talk about writing
Groups. Yeah, maybe we could get Ryan on to do a guest piece on writing groups.
Yeah. Does he have a writing group?
He does. I personally, I've never found the appeal in writing groups, but a lot of people do. So
I understand the appeal. I just haven't found any value.
yeah. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this episode.
Writers of the Dawn.
I'm Jay. You can find me at MatthewJWellman.com.
And this is Stu. You can find me at dvspress.com and davidvstewart.com. Of course, you can email the show at stu at davidvstewart.com, and we welcome any comments, questions, or topics for future videos. And we hope you will have a great day. This has been Riders of the Dawn.
Later.